My sister gave a speech at my wedding, shouting, she once got dumped on her birthday. I was there, she begged him to stay. Everyone burst into laughter. My aunt even shouted, you deserve better. Oh wait, do you? But then my husband spoke up, his voice calm. That man was me. And she told me to leave. The room fell dead silent. I never expected my wedding day to go like this. I mean, I always thought weddings were a time for joy, celebration, and togetherness. I had dreamed of this day for months, maybe even years, gathering all my closest friends and family, marrying the love of my life, Daniel. And for the most part, everything was going perfectly. The ceremony was beautiful. I could see the love and pride in my parents' eyes as they watched me walk down the aisle, and when I looked at Daniel, I knew this was the moment I had been waiting for. But then, everything took a turn. It started innocently enough. We were at the reception, people were mingling, enjoying the food, and the music was soft in the background. My sister, Veronica, who had been one of my bridesmaids, stood up from the head table and raised a glass of champagne. I figured she was about to give a typical wedding toast, maybe a funny story or a heartfelt message to me and Daniel. But that's not what happened. Instead, Veronica looked out at the crowd and began to speak with an oddly forced tone. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, I've known my sister, Lily, for a long time. And while many of you see her as the calm, collected woman she is today, I've seen a side of her that's a little more, let's say, complicated. At first, I thought she was going to talk about how I used to be a mess as a teenager, how I had a hard time with school, or how I always felt out of place. Things that weren't easy for me to hear but were at least light-hearted. But then Veronica's voice shifted, and a chill ran down my spine. You see, she continued, her eyes scanning the room, there was a time when my sister was dumped. And not just any time, no, this happened on her birthday. She had been dating this guy for months, and on her birthday, he decided that was the day he would break up with her. And let me tell you, it was brutal. I felt my stomach twist into knots. That night. She was about to bring up that night. It was a part of my life that I had worked so hard to move past, something I had buried deep inside me. I glanced at Daniel, who was sitting beside me. His hand reached out and gave mine a reassuring squeeze, but even he seemed uncomfortable. Veronica went on, I was there with her. I watched as she begged him to stay. She cried, and she begged him not to leave. It was heartbreaking, really. And honestly, I don't think she's ever truly gotten over it. I could feel the heat rising to my face, and my heart was pounding in my chest. Why was she doing this? Why was she bringing up my past pain in front of all these people, including our parents and my new in-laws? This was supposed to be a happy moment, not a moment of public humiliation. The room was quiet now, except for the uncomfortable coughs and muttered comments from people trying to ease the tension. But Veronica was clearly on a roll, and she wasn't stopping. I know she's embarrassed about it, she said with a small, self-satisfied smile, but she doesn't have to be. We all go through hard times, right? And at least she found someone who could love her after all that. I mean, look at this handsome guy right here. She gestured toward Daniel. She's lucky, really. Some of us never get that second chance. The tension in the room was suffocating, and I could hear my aunt, sitting near the front, snicker loudly. You deserve better, sweetie, she shouted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Oh wait, do you? At this point, I was practically in shock. The room's atmosphere had shifted from festive to awkward and painful. I wanted to get up and run out of there, to escape this awful situation, but I couldn't move. My hands were frozen, and my throat felt tight. Daniel's grip on my hand tightened, but he didn't look at me. Instead, his gaze was locked on Veronica. After a long, painful silence, he stood up from his seat. Actually, Daniel said, his voice surprisingly calm, that man who dumped her, the one who broke her heart on her birthday, that was me. The room immediately fell dead silent. It was as though someone had turned off the music. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, whispering, but nobody dared to speak. Veronica's face turned pale, and I saw her step back, clearly stunned by his words. I was the one who walked away, yes, Daniel continued, his tone still steady, but what you all don't know, what no one knows, is that she told me to leave. She told me I wasn't the one for her. She begged me to walk away because she didn't believe she could handle being loved that much. I didn't want to leave, but she insisted. The room seemed to freeze for a moment, and I could feel everyone's eyes on us, waiting for something, an explanation, a response, a confession. Veronica's voice finally broke the silence, but it was shaky. That's not how it happened, she stammered. I was just trying to help. You didn't deserve to be with someone who didn't appreciate you. But Daniel didn't back down. No, Veronica. The truth is, she was afraid of being loved. And she told me to leave. She was the one who made the choice to end things, not me. But now, years later, she's the one standing here, marrying me. We've built a life together, and I'm the man she chose. I looked up at Daniel, my heart swelling with emotions I hadn't expected to feel. He was right. It was true, everything he said. I had pushed him away when all he ever wanted was to love me. For a moment, the room was still. No one moved. Veronica stood frozen, her face a mixture of shock and guilt. The weight of the truth hung heavy in the air. No one spoke. No one even dared to break the silence. Finally, my voice came out, quiet but firm. Veronica, I said, my eyes meeting hers. I don't know what your motive was for bringing up my past like that, but it wasn't fair. This is my wedding day. This is supposed to be a happy day for me and Daniel. But you chose to turn it into something else. I trusted you, and you betrayed me in front of everyone. Veronica opened her mouth, but no words came out. She just stood there, her face flushed with embarrassment and shame. I'm done, I said, standing up slowly. This isn't the time or the place for this. I don't need this kind of negativity in my life anymore. Daniel's hand found mine again, and together, we walked out of the spotlight, leaving the silence in our wake. The room was still buzzing with whispers, but I no longer cared. As we stepped outside, the cool evening air hit my skin, and I felt like I could breathe again. Daniel wrapped his arms around me, and I sank into his embrace. We didn't speak at first. There was no need to. His presence was enough. We'll deal with this later, he finally whispered, kissing my forehead. But for now, let's just enjoy this moment. It's still our day. And he was right. It was our day. Nothing could take that away. As we stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the weight of the events inside the reception hall still lingered. I could feel the tension in my body, the nerves from everything that had just happened. The laughter and chatter inside the room now felt like it belonged to another world, as though that earlier moment of public humiliation and truth-telling had somehow transported me to a place where none of it seemed real. My wedding had taken a turn I never expected, and now, all I could think about was how to move forward, both with the wedding and with my relationship with Veronica. Daniel squeezed my hand gently, as if sensing my internal struggle. You okay? He asked, his voice soft but sincere. I nodded, though it wasn't entirely true. I felt the sting of betrayal not just from Veronica, but from the entire situation. There was a lot of hurt tied up in that moment, a hurt I wasn't sure I could untangle so easily. I don't know what just happened in there, I finally said, my voice breaking a little. I thought this day was going to be different. It was supposed to be about us, about our future. He didn't answer right away, just held me a little tighter. His presence was a balm, but the wounds were still fresh. I know, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I know. And I'm sorry that it turned into this. But why did she do it? I asked, pulling back slightly to look at him. Why did Veronica bring up all of that? Why make me relive something I've worked so hard to forget? Daniel hesitated before answering. I don't know. Maybe she felt the need to show everyone how close she is to you, to remind everyone of your past. Maybe she thought it would make her look better to be the one telling the story. But whatever her reasons were, they don't matter now. What matters is that you're here, with me. And we have a future ahead of us. I swallowed, trying to process his words. He was right in some ways. Veronica's intentions didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, not compared to what Daniel and I were building. But still, the betrayal felt raw, like a cut that hadn't been properly healed. And every time I thought about it, I felt a knot tighten in my chest. The night was slowly creeping in, and the sound of the band inside was muted by the quiet of the garden we had stepped into. I realized how much I had been holding in, my emotions, the anger, the hurt. I felt like I needed to talk to someone. I need to talk to her, Daniel, I said, finally breaking the silence between us. I need to understand why she did it. I need to hear her side. I don't know if I can just leave this like it is. Daniel sighed, his breath warm against my ear. I understand. But do you think now is the right time? It's your wedding night, Lily. Do you really want to spend the evening fighting with your sister? I thought about that. The more I considered it, the more I realized he was right. This wasn't the time to hash things out. Whatever issues I had with Veronica could wait. I couldn't let her ruin our night, not after everything Daniel and I had been through together. But even as I made that decision, I knew that conversation would come. It had to. For my own peace of mind. I'll deal with it later, I said softly. But I need some time to think. Take all the time you need, Daniel said. I'm right here with you. We'll handle everything, together. We stood in silence for a few more minutes, watching the stars begin to fill the sky. The quiet was soothing, and for a moment, I felt like the world had slowed down, giving me space to breathe and reflect. But I knew that when we went back inside, the room would still be buzzing with whispers. Veronica's actions had left a mark on the night, and though I could pretend for a little while that it didn't matter, I knew it would. It had shaken me in a way I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about the speech, it was about the betrayal, the fact that someone so close to me had publicly exposed my vulnerability, my past heartbreak. When we finally re-entered the reception, I could feel the eyes on us. People seemed to be talking in hushed tones, and I could tell they were all waiting for me to respond, to react in some way. Daniel gave my hand a reassuring squeeze as we walked back toward our seats, but I could feel the tension in my body still. Veronica was nowhere to be seen, which told me she had either left in a hurry or was hiding somewhere, likely too embarrassed to face me after what had transpired. It was strange, though, after all these years of me defending her, of me being the one to cover for her when she messed up, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't something I could forgive easily. We sat back down, and the air in the room felt thick. The energy had changed. It was no longer the light, festive atmosphere it had been before. The guests who had once been laughing and dancing now seemed on edge, unsure of how to act after what had just happened. It was like Veronica's words had cast a shadow over the entire celebration. I tried to focus on Daniel, on the fact that I had just married the most amazing man. I tried to push the thoughts of my sister out of my mind, but it was impossible. How could I ignore it when she had made me the center of her public spectacle? I glanced over at the head table, and sure enough, Veronica wasn't there. My parents were seated quietly, exchanging looks, unsure of what to say to me or each other. I could see the confusion in their eyes, and it made me even more frustrated. Why hadn't anyone spoken up for me? Why had no one stepped in to stop Veronica from taking it too far? The longer I sat there, the more the anger started to build up again. I could feel it simmering beneath the surface, and I didn't want to hold it in much longer. But I didn't want to make a scene. I knew that if I stood up and confronted her right now, it would ruin what little was left of the evening. But I couldn't just let it go either. Daniel could sense my growing frustration, and after a few minutes, he leaned over to me. Do you want to go outside for a little while? Get some air? We don't have to stay here if you don't want to. I considered it for a moment. A part of me wanted to leave, to go somewhere far away from the people who had made me feel small, who had tried to ruin my special day. But another part of me knew that I couldn't run away from this. I needed to face it. I needed to take control of the situation. I'll be fine, I said, giving him a small smile. But thank you. I just need to think about everything. I'm not sure how to deal with Veronica right now, but I don't want this to ruin our night. We've waited too long for this day. Daniel nodded, squeezing my hand again. We'll figure it out. But tonight is about us. No matter what happens with your sister, remember that you're my wife now. And that's all that matters. The night dragged on, and I could feel my resolve starting to fray. Every time I saw a familiar face, I could hear whispers, the uncomfortable silence when people realized I had heard what Veronica had said. It was hard to ignore, and it was even harder to pretend like everything was okay. At some point, I decided I couldn't stay seated anymore. I needed a moment alone, away from the eyes and the awkwardness. I quietly excused myself and slipped outside onto the patio. The cool air hit me like a breath of fresh air, but it didn't do much to calm my mind. I could still hear the hum of the reception from inside, but for a brief moment, I felt a sense of relief. But even in the solitude of the garden, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Veronica had crossed a line, and I wasn't sure how to move forward. The question swirled in my mind: why did she do it? Why did she choose to hurt me like this? The more I thought about it, the more I realized something else. This wasn't just about the wedding, and it wasn't just about Veronica. It was about the deep-seated issues between us, the jealousy, the rivalry that had always existed just beneath the surface. All those years of trying to be the good sister, the one who held everything together, had finally come crashing down. And I wasn't sure I could repair it. Not without facing the truth. Not without confronting the ugly parts of our relationship. I stood outside, my fingers lightly gripping the railing of the patio, and took in a few deep breaths, trying to steady my nerves. The evening air was cool and refreshing, but it didn't ease the whirlwind of thoughts running through my mind. How had it come to this? How had my sister, the one person I had always relied on, become the person who tried to tear me down in front of everyone? I knew that I couldn't just let this slide. Veronica had crossed a line, and as much as I loved her, I couldn't pretend like everything was okay. It wasn't just the public humiliation. It was the fact that she had, in that moment, revealed something I had worked so hard to bury, something I had believed was my shame to bear alone. She had made my past pain her narrative, as if it belonged to her, to be used as a weapon against me. And I couldn't let that go unanswered. As I stood there, Daniel joined me on the patio, his footsteps soft as he approached. I didn't look up at first, just continued to stare at the stars above, trying to gather my thoughts. But then, I felt his hand on my shoulder, warm and steady. "We can go inside, if you're ready," he said quietly, his voice gentle but filled with concern. I turned to him and sighed. I knew he wanted to protect me, to shield me from this mess, but I had to do this on my own. I needed to find my own closure, and I couldn't leave without confronting Veronica. I wasn't about to let her have the final word. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I need to do something first. It's time I took control of this situation, Daniel. I'm not running away from it. Not tonight." He nodded, his gaze steady. "I get it. Just remember, I'm right here. Whatever you decide, I'll support you." I smiled faintly, appreciating the warmth of his words. "Thank you," I whispered. We walked back into the reception hall, and the moment I stepped through the doors, I felt the shift in the room. It was quieter now, the atmosphere still thick with the remnants of the tension Veronica's speech had left behind. People were talking in low voices, but they grew silent as soon as they saw me. The room was waiting. But this time I wasn't going to let anyone dictate my story. I scanned the room, and my eyes quickly landed on Veronica. She was sitting at a corner table, her posture slumped, her head slightly lowered. She was no longer the confident woman who had stood up to make that speech. Now, she looked like a person trapped in her own mistake, a woman who realized the damage she'd done but didn't know how to undo it. I couldn't help but feel a flicker of pity. But that pity didn't erase the anger, the betrayal I felt. I walked over to the table where she sat, and Daniel, sensing my intent, stood a few steps behind me, ready to back me up. I felt his presence like a quiet strength, and it gave me the courage to face my sister. When I reached her, I stopped in front of the table, and she slowly looked up, her eyes filled with uncertainty. Her lips parted as if she were about to say something, but I didn't give her the chance. "Veronica," I said, my voice calm but firm, "what you did today was unforgivable. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. You took something painful from my past and used it against me, as if it was your right to tell that story. You've crossed a line, and you need to understand that." Her face reddened, and she opened her mouth, probably to apologize or offer an excuse, but I raised my hand to stop her. "No," I said, my tone hardening. "I don't want to hear it. I'm not interested in your excuses. You've hurt me, and now I need you to understand the consequences of that." She swallowed, her face twisting in confusion and guilt, but I wasn't done. "I spent so many years protecting you, Veronica," I continued. "I was always the one who looked out for you, who cleaned up your messes, who put my own needs aside to make sure you didn't feel alone. I defended you to everyone. And this is how you repay me? By dragging up my worst moment, my most vulnerable time, and using it as some twisted form of entertainment?" Her eyes darted to the floor, and I could see the guilt settling in, but it didn't change what had happened. She had hurt me in a way that felt irreparable. "You made a choice today," I went on, my voice unwavering. "You chose to tear me down, to make me feel small. And now, I'm going to make sure everyone in this room knows the truth. The truth about what really happened that day." Veronica flinched at my words. The room was silent, waiting to see what I would do. I could feel their eyes on me, sensing the tension in the air. It was now or never. I turned toward the guests and raised my voice slightly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "For the record," I said, "Veronica isn't the hero she wants you to believe she is. She wasn't the one who saved me. She wasn't the one who picked me up when I was broken. No, that person was Daniel, the same man who is sitting here beside me tonight, who never once gave up on me, even when I pushed him away. He's the one who stayed, the one who proved his love for me, even when I didn't believe I deserved it." I paused, letting the words sink in, and I could feel the energy shift in the room. The guests were no longer whispering, they were listening. Daniel was the man I begged to stay when I was broken. And he was the one who left. "Because I told him to," I said, my eyes locking onto Veronica's. "You see, he didn't walk away because he didn't care. He left because I told him to. And if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be standing here today, marrying the man who has loved me through my worst." There was a long pause, and then, slowly, murmurs started to ripple through the room. People were turning their heads, exchanging looks, and I could feel their opinions of me shifting. The truth had been revealed, and for the first time, I felt like I had reclaimed my power. Veronica was silent, her face pale. She didn't speak, didn't defend herself. There was nothing left for her to say. She had tried to control the narrative, to make herself the hero of my story, but the truth had come out. And the truth was, she wasn't the one who saved me. Daniel was. I turned back to face Veronica one last time. "You're my sister, Veronica. And I love you. But today, you made a choice to destroy our relationship for the sake of your ego," I said, my voice softer now, but still resolute. "I need time to figure out where we go from here. But don't think that what you did doesn't have consequences. It does. And you'll have to live with that." I took a deep breath, letting it all sink in, before I turned to Daniel and reached for his hand. He didn't say a word, but I could feel his support, his love radiating through his touch. It was enough. We walked back to the head table, and the energy in the room shifted again. The guests began to talk among themselves, but this time, it was different. The whispers were no longer about me, about the embarrassment Veronica had caused. They were about the truth. They were about how I had stood up for myself, how I had taken back control of my story. As the evening continued, I knew that nothing would ever be the same with Veronica. I didn't know what the future held for our relationship, But one thing was certain, I would never let her take my power from me again. And as for Daniel, my husband, he was my partner in every way that mattered. Together, we would face whatever came our way. And no one would ever make me feel small again. The night ended with a sense of peace that I hadn't expected. The tension had dissipated, and although the shadows of the past still lingered, I had found a way to reclaim my voice, my truth. My wedding day was far from what I had imagined, but in the end, it was the most powerful thing I had ever experienced. And I knew that no matter what happened with Veronica, I was ready for whatever came next, because I had Daniel, and I had myself. And that was enough.